If you're the owner of a Roland SP404, odds are you've already found your ideal use case, right? Whether you're using vinyl samples, chopping, resampling, making a beat, whatever it is you typically do. But it seems like my sole purpose here on YouTube is to offer you some alternative use cases for the SP404 and just different ways to put this thing into use. So, in this video, I'm going to show you how to turn the SP404 into a dreamy, ambient soundscape machine that you can take with you to, a cafe or a tea house maybe, and or in this case, maybe bring it out to the forest and meditate a little bit, who knows, it's up to you. If you know how to play an instrument already, or if you're willing to maybe recite some poetry or sing a little bit, this video might be quite a bit more interesting to you. I'm Ukes, welcome back. I'm now in Guiyang, China. Welcome to the new studio. It's not nearly as pretty as the last one, but it's quite a bit more permanent. So, once I get all my stuff shipped in from Shanghai, hopefully I'll have a much nicer place to make videos for you all. So, I'll share it all with you soon. So, here's the general concept, right? We're gonna fill the SP404 with a collection of samples that you can trigger very sparsely to create some ambient music. There's not much more to it, ambient music is meant to be very unobtrusive and ideally minimal, right? So I'm going to fill 9 of these 10 banks. I always leave one empty just in case you want to resample something you like. I'm going to fill 9 of these 10 banks with different instruments, mix them with soundscapes and whatnot, and show you how to perform with them. You can use this technique to accompany an instrument, such as the xiao. You can use it with a synthesizer or something kind of melodic. You could use it with spoken word or poetry or something, audible, something that you don't necessarily need to be a musician in order to do. Or honestly, you could use it with nothing else at all. You could use it on its own if you just want to create some atmosphere. My express goal is to create a song that doesn't require constant attention. This isn't a showcase of skill on the 404, 2 hands always moving. In fact, I want to interact as little with the SP404 as possible, because that way you still have both of your hands and your attention, and you can give those to an instrument that you're playing, or, your performance during your spoken word, or just calm, meditation, whatever it is you want to do. We have a couple of soundscapes, a couple of long pad sounds, couple instruments to play with, a little bit of percussion, and a couple of other little goodies in here. So I'm going to run you through each set of banks and show you how I've got them all set up. I've decided this time around I'm going to make this card available for download, so you can try it too if you have an SP404 Mark I. But the idea isn't really to copy these particular sounds. To be honest, I threw this together very quickly, and I think if you really want to make something pretty, you could put some tender love and care in and select sounds that you really like and that you think would match your personality quite a bit more. Just focus in this video on how things are organized and sorted, right? Write down the card organization, try to rebuild it yourself with your own sounds. If there's something in here that you don't like, or you think the card could be better organized to suit your own workflow, go for it. I'm not a cop. Do whatever it is you want to do. Just have fun, but most importantly, try something new, because it'll really help you get more familiar with this instrument that we all know and love. All right, let's get started. Bank A is full of atonal sound design. In my case, I filled it with nature sounds, like environment sounds, right? Row 1, or in this case, row 3, right, is rain. Now, I adore rain. I think it's just such a staple of calm, relaxing sounds. I fall asleep to rain sound every night. Now, let me explain how I've organized this, right? All 4 of these pads are sourced from the same sound recording, one type of rain. I consider this row to be one instrument, let's say. If I switch between different sounding rains, like suburban rain on concrete and jungle rain through a bunch of leaves, it just wouldn't really sound right in a performance. You kind of just want one sound environment. So why do we have 4 different pads for one particular sound? Well, pad 1 has a very short attack, right? It reaches its full volume in about 3 seconds. You can hear it now. And the sample lasts for about 1 minute, 60 seconds. The tail of the sample is very, very long. I think it's about 10 or 15 seconds, which means you want to be able to just press the button and forget it. Let it go, let it ride its course, right? But you don't want the sample to last forever. So as you start to add more samples, you probably want to let that rain eventually subside and focus on other sounds. So you can set it, forget it, and it'll play for about 1 minute. Pads 2 and 3, or in this case 10 and 11, will continue the sound, right? These are the same sound, but they have a much slower attack, like 10 seconds. So if your rain is already going and you want it to go longer, you just add 2 or 3. And you don't hear it come in because it's a very long crossfade. You won't notice any hard cuts. It'll act just like, a very smooth crossfade. Now there's 2 samples here because, believe it or not, 1 minute looped rain sound, for me, isn't quite enough, right? Pads 2 and 3 are different parts of the same rainstorm. There's just very minute differences between them. They vary ever so slightly. I like knowing I've got 3 different chunks of rain to play with here and to fade in between. The pad number 4 is different, okay? Pad number 4 is the full 20-minute audio recording of the rainstorm. If I'm going to perform for a very long time, which I often do, and I want it to rain for 20 straight minutes, and I don't want to think about having to keep the rain going, that's what pad number 4 is for. Once I've pressed this button, it's just going to go for 20 minutes, and I can't stop it. So that's 9 through 12, right? 1 through 4, 5 through 8 are the exact same concept with different sounds, right? 5 through 8 is this very pretty nature, lakeside, very peaceful morning, very relaxing. Hear a couple birds, the gentle lapping of a lakeside. It's just a very peaceful sound. And 1 through 4 is a campfire. It's like a nice roaring fire. It's still quite cold here in Guiyang, so something very just kind of warm. Just, we have 3 different options for whatever kind of soundscape you want to use. And again, they're all laid out the same way, right? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11 are just, 1 minute long, slow attack sounds. And then the last row over here is kind of a hold for 20 minutes. Field recording and ambient soundscapes are so fun, right? And you can find so many of them on the internet for free just because people go out and this is their hobby, just to collect sounds from around the world. Freesound.org has a lot. Archive.org also has a lot. But if you're into it and you want to make something really intimate, it's really fun to go out there and record your own using your phone or a Zoom recorder or even I haven't tried the SP404 mic for field recording, but it's worth a shot. Just get out into the world and find a place that means something to you, somewhere that brings you some peace. Set up your microphone, sit in silence for like 20 minutes, and then, just load those sounds onto the SP404. Forests, your favorite cafe, anywhere that brings you like a sense of comfort and a sound that you would want to integrate into your art. Because, metaphorically, you're taking the sound of a place that brings you comfort, of a place that you love. And if you go to perform an ambient set somewhere, you're taking that sound from somewhere and presenting it to a group of people, which it really is quite special. It just depends on, how you integrate it into your song. So just give it a try. Some sounds work, some sounds don't. All right, coming down to F, right beneath A. F are various one-shots, right? They're pretty varied, but they kind of complement bank A. I consider this bank to be mostly sound effects, right? Not quite musical, but not really soundscape either. The rest of the banks are way more musical in nature, so stay tuned. For this bank, you fill it with a variety of something you're going to want to trigger throughout your performance, right? But try to think of a theme, right? So for me, 1 through 4 are thunderstrikes. Naturally, these go really, really well with the rainstorm, right? And it's very dynamic because, they last a little bit longer, and they're not like a very sharp attack, so they really fold into your song quite well. 4th through 8 are just some wind chimes. Just some, wind, some bells going in there, just between, 5 and 20 seconds long or so, just, peaceful little things. 9 and 10 are a Tibetan singing bowl. Very common sight in a lot of meditation things and yoga. 9 is a strike and 10 is like the ring, when it's a strong resonance, so you don't want to keep that one too loud in your mix. And lastly, down here, 11 and 12 are little meditation bells. If you're using this, for example, to lead a meditation session, or if you're like a yoga person and you want to signal the beginning and end of a session, you have these little bells. Or it could be to signal the beginning or the end of your performance. Just little bells. Just to get the general idea of how we're going to mix and meld these things, let's just try something with A and F together. Start with some rain sound. Crack of thunder. Some bells. And a little. And maybe some more bells. You kind of get where we're going with this, just little triggers here and there. Because there's no musical components yet, you can really just do stuff whenever you feel, if that's your cup of tea, cup of coffee, sip. Let's move on. B and G, okay? So B and G are what I'm calling passive instruments, right? These are your soundscapes that have a bit more melody, a bit more musicality to them, right? I suggest using your favorite pad synthesizer or something that evolves a lot, but is still, reserved in nature. You don't want this to grab too much attention, right? So starting in B, these are just some 1 minute long pad sequences that I made using Native Instruments Arkhis, which I've just started using recently, and the sounds are just so good. It is one of my favorite of all time virtual instruments. They're just these super rich and deep pads. I purposefully kept the resonance and everything quite in the lower frequencies, and I just recorded like some chords in the key of A minor and just, very, very minimal, very in the back, but very deep and cool. A couple little swells, mostly using automation. Now, in this bank, I definitely don't want to be playing more than one at a time, right? Because these are chords, and if you play more than one pad at a time, it's going to be very muddled and very hard to distinguish one from another. And there's really no strategy right now for switching between these pads on this bank. So far, I've just kind of let them finish out, and assuming there's something else going in the background, such as, nature sound, when the sound comes to an end, you just switch back to the bank and, trigger another set of chords. Simple enough. All right, beneath that, down in G, is a very similar concept. This time I wanted something a little more present, a little more in the higher frequencies. The last one was very bassy and rumbly, but I still wanted it to, G to be in the background. So I chose another just amazing instrument from Native Instruments called Lors. Lors mixes like a very interesting selection of real-world instruments with these sort of vocal samples and vocal pads, and you just get some very unique sounds. So some of the pads are just like a single chord and some are a bit longer. So to be honest, this is where I fell a little short because I think I should have done like 1, 2, 3, 4 being much longer, maybe like 1 minute, like the Arkhis pads in B, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 being shorter. Right now, they're kind of all over the place between 5 and 20 seconds long, but you know, or vice versa. I don't know. I should have put more thought into this one, but it sounds nice. That's the important thing. Before we move on, let's try some together. I'm gonna start with some ambience now. Add one of our pads. And how you balance the pads in terms of volume is kind of up to you. If you want the pads to be a little bit louder, you want the soundscape to fall into the background, you know, whatever it is you want to do. Add a couple little tried combining B and G together. It might be too much, but let's see. Maybe a little too much, but you know, depending on what sounds you use, you might be able to make that work. Something where B and G are always complementary to one another. Just, it sounds pretty good. Banks C and H are what I'm calling active instruments. These are instruments that you can use to play out some semblance of a melody, right? Something that is clearly musical in nature, right? Tuned percussion is always a good way to go. In this case, I've chosen the Handpan because it's a great sound, it's very mellow, it's chill, it's very easy to play, and it's in the key of A minor pentatonic scale, so you can play any two notes together. You can play it kind of mindlessly, and it'll always sound good. And of course, I've added some reverb, so it lasts quite a bit longer. I use Eventide Black Hole, which, much like Frank's Red Hot, I put it on everything, just because it sounds so spacey and nice. All right, down in H, we have an Indian Tanpura, which is also taken from Native Instruments, in this case, Native Instruments East Asia. Not to be confused with the sitar, the much more popular instrument. The Tanpura has got this very interesting resonating sound. And in this case, instead of going with something more mellow, I wanted something just a little bit punchier. I wouldn't go out to play melodies on this, but a couple notes here and there, can sound quite nice. Now you're probably hearing some distortion, something interesting there. That is Eventide Mangled Verb. Mangled Verb is a very interesting kind of reverb, where it's distorted reverb, because again, in this case, the Handpan here with the black hole is so mellow and relaxed, and I wanted an instrument to sort of juxtapose that. So I took this, this plucked, very resonant sound, and you hear that delayed reverb there, which is just kind of granular and distorted. So I think that's such a cool. This is the most aggressive sound we have on this card. So, to only break this out when you think that there's a moment of, a moment that's rather appropriate for something that's, quite granular like this. Just as before, let's try bringing A, F, B, G, and C, H all together, right? So I'll start with some rain sound here. Crack of thunder. Try something from Lords. Alright, that's that one M's. Let's go to something from Arkhis. Now we can play a little melody. Now, if you're real quick and you're familiar with your sounds, you can kind of jump back and forth between C and H and play a little duet or a little call and response. If you're not too familiar with making a melody, having a little pentatonic scale here is very helpful, and repetition is such a great part of ambient music and just music making in general. Something, just a happy little accident out of the SP404 is if your note has a very long sustain, the button's going to hold until it's done ringing out. So if you play a melody, let's say 713. It almost remembers what you played, so you can just... So just if you're in the middle of a performance, having those little lights just to remind you what you just played, that's pretty helpful. I improvise a lot of my music, so I have a pretty bad memory, so it's just nice to have a little remember. Let's move on, okay? D and I are for drum and percussion. So D is for strictly percussion. It's a little percussion kit from Native Instruments East Asia again. This time it is a Korean folk percussion set. And there's a little bit of black hole reverb on it, so... just some really spaced out kind of percussion here, and it doesn't really need to be played with too much rhyme or reason. I like this bank a lot because if you're accompanying someone or something and you want to add some rhythm to what it is you're doing, you can always make a little beat just if you have one drum kit loaded up. So yeah, it could be something so minimal and simple. Ambient music and drums is sort of an interesting combination, but it's always nice to have just a little bit of rhythm on hand just in case you choose to add a little bit of structure, a little bit of rhythm to your song. So having, or not, or just play, kind of, what's the word, cadenza, very drawn out percussion if you feel it accents or, accentuates some part of your performance. Now, the I bank deviates from the ambient idea a little bit. I is a set of 3 drum kits, each with 4 loops, right? This part is to satiate the lo-fi beatmaker that's deep inside of every one of us. If you sit down to, try meditating or just try to make some sounds and you find everything's really, melding together quite well and you want to make a beat out of it, you might just benefit from having a couple of drum loops loaded up. Now, specifically, these are very passive, muted drums. They still fit the ambient feeling, the ambient vibe, right? Let me go through what I've prepared. 1 through 4 is a lo-fi kit. You can feel how it's very slow and grooving. All of these drum loops are in 60 BPM, so it does kind of go with the ambient vibe a little bit. Just something in case you're feeling a bit of a groove coming on. Row 2 is a bit more mechanical in nature. It's a very muted drum machine as opposed to, a lo-fi kit. It sounds a lot like a Volca, maybe a Vocal Beats or something. It's very short samples, but it's very poignant, and it keeps a very solid rhythm going. On its own, it sounds very weak. It's very, very quiet, and the frequency is very, very narrow. But when you have a lot of ambient stuff going on, that's kind of what you want to be focusing on. This will just kind of keep some kind of structure. Lastly, row 3, 9 through 12 is a different kit. It's very similar. It's a drum machine, but it's run through a very interesting wire recorder simulator called Wires by Handpan and Audio Thing. It's got a little tape delay in here. So there's some interesting rhythms going on because of that. I think it's a .8 delay. And again, it's the wire simulator, much like a tape simulator. It adds a lot of saturation and just kind of compresses the whole dynamic range, so it's very narrow. And you don't want any drum kits that are pounding and compressed and intense or in your face. You want things that are very laid back, but also very consistent. And you'd be hard pressed to find many drum loops in ambient songs, but depending on who you are and what sound editors you're going for, it is nice to have just a couple things like this prepared. Arguably, there's a lot going on in this one particular drum loop for ambient music, but just in case you feel you want a little bit more rhythm and not too much melodic elements or soundscape going on, it's nice to have something just a little bit busier than the other drum loops, just in case. Again, giving yourself some options is really what this is all about. Lastly, in E, remember J is blank, just because if you want to resample any of this or have a performance, it's nice just to have a spare bank. E is some electronic piano, Rhodes, obviously. Rhodes they work with almost anything, man. I could listen to Rhodes piano and rain sound for hours. I think a lot of us could. It's just this very, very chilling. The only thing worth mentioning with regards to organization here is that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 are just single chords. I played them by hand to give them sort of like a human feeling. There's just a couple of little grace notes in there, little flares. If you don't know how to play chords or you don't know how to play piano at all, that's fine. There are chord generating softwares out there. Launchpad by Novation obviously has a chord mode. Native Instruments Machina also has a whole chord functionality in there, or you can just download chords online. You know, whatever works. Just get some chords, all one instrument that you can kind of just bounce between. Nice to have some chords. Now this top row here, 1 through 4, are actually loops, and the loops synchronize with the drum loops. They're all both 60 BPM. So, you know, you pick one of your drum loops here, and then you have a very mellow chord progression going here. Mix this in with you could add some structure and make, you know, a little bit more of a song than just a stretched out ambient muddled mess, right? You've got the elements here to do that. Obviously, you don't have too many options, right? In this case, I only have 4 chord progressions and 12 loops. But if you wanted to string together a live set and weave that in between your kind of lo-fi ambience and sound design, you can do that. Again, it depends on how you plan to structure your performance or, your ambient session. Personally, I think this works very well, especially at the end. You could have, if you're at an art gallery, right, you could have kind of 20 minutes of you playing a flute and some cool ambient sound going, and then at the end have a little bit of a lo-fi session. It's fun, you can combine this however you want. Worth mentioning, synchronization isn't necessarily easy or fun. You have a loop going, and if you want to play another loop on top of that, you have to do it on the downbeat. It's not that hard. As long as your drum beat has a clear downbeat, right, a clear 1, then it's not particularly hard to sync. And if you want to change between your loops, just on the downbeat, gotta press both at the same time, turn one off, turn one on. All the instruments are in the same key, A minor, right? I should have said that earlier, but Handpan, Tanpura, Chords, Soundscapes and everything, it's all in A minor, D minor. So no matter what you play, it's always going to sound good together. Although if you play too much, it might be a bit louder. So that's it. That's the whole card. Soundscapes and one-shots. You've got 2 passive instruments, 2 active instruments, percussion kit, drum loops, some keys, and some blank space, right? So how far will one card get you? How long does this performance last? It depends on you, and it depends on your show. I think if you really space out your performance, again, play very sparsely and add things very, very slowly, roll this stuff out, roll out the instruments, pace yourself slowly, and, you put in instrumental performances or, a couple verses of poetry. I think one card like this could go an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. It depends on how frequently you want to play. If you want to be, more dynamic and more, if you want to play things more quickly, then obviously it won't last quite as long. Eventually you're going to run out of sounds, and this stuff may not last if you, play a new sound every minute, right? You don't have many different drum kits. You don't have many different chord progressions. There's only 4 chord progressions if that's your thing you want more of. So you're not going to have a very long performance if you move quickly. If you're looking for a more dynamic performance, just make a couple of these cards, right? You could make 5 cards that follow this exact same format with different soundscapes, different chords, different instruments, and you could swap them every 10 minutes, or you can use the card backup function and in between songs just load up a different sound. You could switch every 10 minutes or so. But the thing is, we're so used to being very busy-minded, trying to work and look busy and just work with so many different sounds and ideas, and again, just keep a dynamic performance. The point of this experiment is to not do that, right? It's honestly worth a shot to see how long you can sit and be calm and just play with a few notes at a time, just a few chords, some peace and quiet, right? I hope this is something you're interested in trying out, mainly as an experiment to break up your workflow and try something new. I hope you're able to integrate this into your performance if this is something that interests you, and I hope it brings you some calm, some peace of mind. I'm Ukes in Guiyang, China. Happy beat making.